right, here we are. Question just popped up. Just picked up a BSR number 12 skillet with a handle that's screwed on the lid. Yeah, they did make handles screwed onto the lids. I have an enameled BSR chicken fryer that has a lid like that. So they did. But anyway, glad to see everybody's here. I'm going to make the beginnings at least. Make sure I got everything from over here. I'm going to make at least the beginnings of beef barley soup. I won't have time to do the whole thing. It takes about 2 or 3 hours of simmering, but I can get you the start going, and that's kind of the important part. If you're wondering where the cat is, you can see a cat right there. Mostly just the cat's ass. But what I'm going to use for doing this is my old Wagner flat bottom pot. It's a nice flat bottom kettle. You can use a Dutch oven, works really good for this. That's an old, I don't know how good it's going to show. That's an old number 8 ARC logo Wagner flat bottom pot. And I really like these for making soup because you can brown up your meat right in the pot. And it works really good for that. And you don't have to change. You'll use a skillet to brown your meat and dump it in something else to make the rest of it. Yeah, grab my glasses. Maybe I can see the comments from over here. Back to go again. But I'll get this here heated up. I think I will open an eye. She's already heating up pretty good. So, I don't think I will have to open up an eye. I'll just dump in some clarified butter. I don't have quite as much as I think I'm going to need, but that's okay. I'll add a little oil if I have to. I was going to make some more, and I got busy with other things. But we'll get that. That might be enough. We'll get that melting in there. I was hoping you could see, hoping you could see good into the pot, but it's a little dark. Hopefully you'll be able to see the meat a little better. That's already smoking. I'm going to move over here with it. We'll see how she cooks up. Now, I've got about 1.5 pounds of beef. I just chunked up an eye of round roast. It doesn't really matter what kind of beef you use. Just dice it up into whatever sizes you want. I'm going to do this in a couple, 2 or 3 batches. I'm just going to sear this meat off. Spread that around. I get a little more light right closer here. That's better. One thing I didn't grab was a hot pad. Now you don't want to do this all at once because that'll overload the pan. It'll be a bit too much all at once and it won't brown as well as it should. But you don't need to cook it all the way through. Just stir it around, give it a bit of a sear. You see that ain't too bad. Get you up there. Give her another handful quick. this back over where she's a little bit hotter. You're kind of constantly moving your pan around on a wood stove. But let that start to sear up and it'll release and flip her around a bit. Another nice thing about the flat bottom pots is they're higher than a Dutch oven. So when you fry in them, you don't get nearly as much splattering around as you would with a skillet or a Dutch oven or a chicken fryer. It might need just a little splash more of oil. And when I do my last handful of meat, I'll give it a little bit of salt and pepper. Not much salt because there's salt in the beef broth. And it's easy to add a little salt at the end when you're finishing up. You don't want to over salt too soon because you can't take the salt back out. Spin my pot around. And just a tiny bit more oil. If you don't already have one, I highly recommend you get a wok shovel. Even if you don't own a wok, this is probably the handiest kitchen tool ever invented. I just love this thing. All right, just a few more seconds on that. Okay, that should be good. There, got the meat browned up nice. And what we do now, get a little bit cooler spot, is deglaze the pan. You want to get any whoops, you want to get the fond off of there. Scrape that around, get any bits and pieces off the bottom. I'm just using pre-made beef broth here. Got the sizzling settled down. I'm going to use 2 quarts of beef broth for this. And this is just store-bought boxed broth. It's nothing fancy. You can use your own homemade beef stock. You can use water with some bouillon cubes in it, or better than bouillon, something like that. You just want a nice beef broth. Get in there, you. Now, throw the beef back in. I don't want it splashing all over too much. And all of that juice with it. Got to get that juice back in there. Get this where she's a little bit hotter. Stir that around. Now, mushrooms. For soup, there's nothing better than dehydrated mushrooms. These are just ordinary white button mushrooms you get at the store. Slice them up, throw them in the dehydrator, and dry them out. You can't overcook them, and they'll keep kind of a little bit of a leathery, chewy texture. But the great thing about them is when you dry them, and especially once you age them a little bit afterwards, it concentrates the mushroom flavor, and you get a real nice mushroomy flavor in your broth. Add, about enough, and then some more. And those will soak up some of the broth as they reconstitute. Stir them around a bit. I didn't pepper this yet. I'm going to give it some salt and pepper. Like I said, not a whole lot of salt because you don't want to oversalt it too soon. Although starchy things like barley and potatoes are pretty forgiving on the salt, they can really absorb a lot. Stir that up a little bit. And now for the barley. You want to use about 1/3 of a cup of barley for each quart of liquid you have. So I got 2/3 of a cup. That's not a lot of barley. You won't think that's nearly enough, but that's actually going to be a ton of barley once it all soaks up and expands, because it expands to about 10 times its size. I don't know if it's that much, but barley does expand hugely. And I noticed there was a comment earlier, last time you made beef barley soup, the barley all clumped together and burned to the bottom. You probably used too much barley for the liquid you had. See, this won't be quite as thick as a stew, but it will thicken up to some degree. It's thicker than a soup, but thinner than a stew usually. And we'll let that get back up to a boil, and then I'll cover it. Let me give her a taste here quick and see how hot it is and where we're at. Yeah, that's good. And it's warming up good. Now, like I said, that's an antique Wagner. That's from 1892 up till about 1910. But a number 8, even though it's a number 8 kettle, number 8 skillet and Dutch oven lids do not fit. What does fit perfectly is this enameled Desco-ware lid. So I got a nice yellow lid for my cast iron pot. Now I'll bring that back up to a boil. Then I'll shove it over onto a cooler part of the stove and let it sit and simmer for a couple hours at least before we get to the next step. And like I said, I won't be able to get you all the way through it. But that right there is 90% of making beef barley soup. What does DO mean? Dutch oven, generally. Let me move my camera and my microphone around. Try not to make you seasick in the process. Gotta move my chair. This is always kind of a production after cooking on the wood stove, getting things back around where I need them to be. But where did I put my hot pad? I had a hot pad. There it is. And I can get a little bit of this stuff off my butcher block. Move that. And I should be able to catch up a little bit on some of the comments anyway. Close that off so you don't get motion sickness moving the camera around. Get my close to my microphone, get that out of the way a bit. Moving the camera. Trying not to smash the camera into the iron hanging from the ceiling. Almost there. I gotta move that microphone out of the way. This will probably get a bit noisy. That did not work well. Now I'll have to move it back. Oh well. All that thumping and bumping for nothing. Got wires all over the place, tangled up. It's just a chaos. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. And by the time I get this moved around, damn show will be over. Problem is I got the arm from my camera crossed up with the arm from my microphone. Got one going over the other and above and around and through. Let's see here. Almost done. And now I got to adjust some lights. Try and get my mic up higher so it might be out of the way. Got to kill most of these lights, otherwise it's way too bright. There we go. Get a peek quick, see if I'm boiling yet. Not quite. Getting close though. Now, hopefully, power outage. Not quite. There we go. There's me, more or less. Kind of a weird angle. Anyway, me wipe my fevered brow, and in keeping with the Barley theme for the evening, gonna have some beer. Anyway, once that comes up to a boil, I'll move it back off the heat a little bit, and it should be good. I'm gonna see if I can sneak this around so maybe we can get the, there we go, get the stove in the shot. And the mic ain't too bad in the way. Everything else is, but that's how it goes sometimes. How's my chest? It's doing just fine. Don't try this at home. I'm a trained professional. Yes, I am. No, the feed didn't disconnect. I just flipped the lens cover down because otherwise, swooping and diving with the camera as I try and move it around the room gets to be a bit disturbing for quite a few people. Try and back up at least a little ways here and catch up on some of the comments. Would a camp oven work on a stove like mine? The camp ovens usually have feet, and it would work not so much for frying things, but for soups and things like that, where you want to simmer it slow. It'll get it up off of the top of the stove a bit. So you'd be able to simmer things slow over a hot stove, but generally they're not the best choice. A regular Dutch oven or a flat bottom pot like that, where you can sit it down right on the stove, usually works better. Wife said, so get your fiber with beef barley. Yeah, you do get some fiber with them. And, I like barley. It's really good. Like I say, that's 90% of making the soup. The rest is adding vegetables later on, but you usually don't want to add those until like the last half hour, 45 minutes, depending on what you're using. I'm going to put I got some frozen peas and carrots. I'll throw those in there because I like peas and carrots. You can add potatoes if you want to, but there's quite a bit of starch in the barley, so adding potatoes, you get a nice potato taste to it. But it's a bit overkill, makes it a bit starchier than you really usually want it to be. But the vegetables, you would add them in the last half hour or so you don't overcook them. Like I said, the mushrooms, you can't really overcook those dehydrated mushrooms, but they really, when you dehydrate them like that really concentrates the flavor. And those are, probably a year and a half old. It seems like they get better as they age. So I got to make some more here pretty soon. I'm getting kind of low, but they're great for soups, chicken, beef, any kind of soup like that, because they really flavor the stock good. You get a nice mushroom taste. Other than that, it's just a matter of letting it sit and simmer for a couple, 3 hours. Give it a stir every once in a while. There should be enough liquid that it'll circulate and shouldn't burn or stick. Like I said, the reason why it burned and clumped up and burned on whoever it was that mentioned it earlier, you probably had too much barley for your liquid, because the barley expands hugely when you cook it. That little 2/3 of a cup of barley will end up with half a pot full of barley by the time you're done. So don't let it fool you. About 1/3 of a cup for every quart of liquid. It seems to be what works best. Finally found a BSR 5S. You have a 3, 5, 7, and 8. The 8S is the same size as a regular, so I don't know what the difference is supposed to be. Yeah, who was saying here later on, it's probably just a mold mark. I don't know if they made 8s in the BSR S small series. The S, they're Red Mountain series, and they got the bigger letters, and there's a big letter S after the size number, and they're really one size smaller than the size it says it is. Like I say, I'm not sure if they made 8s. Maybe they did. but I would assume they'd be the size of a number 7 if it's the actual S series, not just a marker. I'm going to check and see if that's boiling here quick. Yes, it is. So I'll give it a stir. Move it over to a little cooler part of the stove. And before the show ends, I'll dish up a little bit and show you how much the barley and the mushrooms have reconstituted. We need a BSR book, info is lacking. That would be a great idea. Someone like Steven Strawn, seems to be pretty knowledgeable about it, and he's got a lot of stuff. If you could put together a book, find some other folks who are knowledgeable about BSR. I know a little bit about him, but he kind of specializes in that. But a BSR book is definitely something that we need, something current. Because a lot more people are getting into collecting BSRs. Are usually pretty reasonable price because they're not marked with a logo and a brand name. So a lot of people pass them by. They're more interested in something's got a big cool logo on it, which makes perfect sense. But Vintage Lodge and BSR, you can usually get considerably cheaper, and they're damn nice pans. Can't find tea-size cornstick pans. Yeah, they're fairly scarce. And they usually go pretty good money when you come across them. Seven T is hard to find. Got your second 7L done, so you can do corn dogs. Yeah, that really works cool when you stack the two corn stick pans on top of each other making corn dogs. Steven is doing a book. Good. We'll have to pick that up when he gets it out. Indeed, up-to-date Lodge products. Hard to get info on some of it. Yeah, and for some reason, not a lot of social media. Apparently, somebody knows a guy whose uncle worked at Lodge once. Don't say when or what he did. I mean, whether he was the casting supervisor or the guy who swept the warehouse. He worked for Lodge. And according to him, the no notch, one notch, and arc logo Lodge were all made around 1930. You got the current style of Lodge with the logo and the groove instead of the heat ring. Everything else Lodge ever made outside of that was made between 1964 and 1992. And apparently this is an absolute gospel fact, indisputable, because some guy knows somebody whose uncle might have worked there once. And people will actually argue that on different social media sites. It's just ridiculous. Because if you actually think about it, no company in the world is going to make 20 different variations of the same product at the same time. I mean, you'll have overlap when you're phasing in one style, phasing out the old one. It was real common for cast iron to have a few years of overlap between logos, styles, sizes, things like that. But, every variation of marking, every design, everything that they changed on Lodge over the years being made all at the same time is just stupid. I mean, whoever came up with this and actually believes this has no idea how manufacturing actually works. And I've had gotten a little bit of a discussion with somebody once over the raised molders marks on older Lodge pans. Lodge workers used to get paid piecework at the foundry. So when the mold maker made a mold, he had a little stamp with a code letter for him, for himself. And he'd stamp all of the sand in the molds, which would make a raised letter on the back of the pan. And they were discussing whether it was an M or a W. And I said, well, it's probably a W. A lot of them are upside down because the mold maker would stand on one side, just reach across and stamp his mold on it. And they were throwing a fit over, well, apparently even back then, nobody cared about craftsmanship and they were too lazy to bother to take it right, take the time and do it right. No, he was just marking out so he got paid. And the thing is, the mold maker would get paid so much for each pan, each mold that he made. And out of that, the two guys under him that actually, once the casting had cooled off, who broke the molds, shook the pans out of the sand, cleaned them up, they got paid out of his payment. So they're not going to be happy if he's dicking around, carefully marking each little letter, super precise, super perfectly aligned. They don't want him wasting time because the more they get done, the more they get paid. And they're not going to stand for some schmuck standing there, doing unnecessarily things like that. Just put your damn mark on it so we all get paid and get on with it. But, there's people who are dead set that it was lazy union workers. Well, no, they weren't union workers. It was famously non-union in those days, most places like that. And if you're getting paid piecework, you're going to do as good of a job you can so it's acceptable, but you're not going to worry about the perfect alignment of your maker's mark on it. All you want is, the 35 cents a pan that you're going to get paid for it. And the guys behind you, want their nickel or dime or whatever they get for each pan out of that 35. Yeah, exactly, Huey. They were on all the single notch and some of the 3-notch, mostly in the 30s, to track the money they made. And that's exactly what it was. They were just putting their name on it so they got paid for making that pan, because that's how they got paid. The more pans you made, the more you got paid. And like I said, the next couple of guys down the line, they're going to want to move your ass along too, because they get paid out of they get a cut of every pan that you made as the mold maker. The only picture type you have is a 3-notch with a duck on it. It was nice. Like I said, it's Lodge made a lot of the wildlife series and a bunch of other series. So that's really a whole rabbit hole you can go down trying to collect. And there's a couple of different generations of the different series. Even the same series. A duck, a fish, a deer. There's a couple of different generations of those too. So you can definitely get into that. And like I said, a book would be really handy. Something up to date and as comprehensive as you can make it with what's known and what's out there. When you first started collecting, there's a guy that'd sell you the worthless unmarked skillets for a couple of bucks a piece. Yeah, like a lot of people just weren't interested in them, but people are catching on now with the the 1-notch and no-notch Lodge. Those are going for a lot more than they used to. Same with BSR. Those are getting out there. Because a lot more people are collecting BSR because it was nice cast iron. They're both a little heavier than Griswold and Wagner usually were, but they kind of prided themselves on that too. A lot of people preferred a heavier pan. It's a big, heavy, sturdy pan. It's going to last you a lifetime. And with them and with Martin the same way, that was kind of a selling point. It's a massive heavy pan, you're never going to need to buy another one. The secret is out on BSR going kind of crazy. Yeah, especially some of the odd size ones. So there are some that are a lot rarer. I mean, the number 4 BSR goes for a lot of money. And yeah, there's some of the hammered and some of the other, different. A lot of the scarce stuff that's really, really catching on. Get caught back up here. You'll learn that. Love being told that a BSR Century is an unmarked Griswold made in the early 1900s. Trying to correct the seller and piss him off. Let's see. Whenever you called Lodge to ask about something, when something was made, was maybe from this year to that year. Lodge seems to have less information about their products than most collectors. Yeah, and there is a Lodge book that was, I guess it was sold by Lodge. It's got reprints of some of the pages from their old catalogs. And you can't necessarily date things by the catalog illustrations, and I've seen that a lot in the reprints of the Lodge catalogs and things like that, because they would reuse a lot of the same illustration for decades. For a skillet, skillet's a skillet. They were selling them, wholesale. They were selling them by the ton rather than by the unit piece. So they weren't terribly worried about keeping up to date on a lot of their illustrations. Some things they would, if it was more of a specialty item, they gave you a fairly accurate picture or something. They were really hyping, their new product. They would have that. But a lot of the pictures they show are actually from a generation or two before the year that the catalog was actually printed. Is the no notch Lodge ARC logo before 30s? Yeah, they were 20s up into the early 1930s is kind of the best range most folks have for those. And there's no notch Lodges that don't have the logo on them either. Your current favorite's a dual logo National Wagner number 9. Yeah, they're nice pans. And the dual marked ones, the Wagner Nationals, those kept the heat ring all the way up until they discontinued them in like 1940, 1942. Otherwise, Wagner had gotten rid of the heat ring on everything else, 1934, 35. They eliminated the heat ring and went with smooth bottoms on everything except for the Nationals, and they kept the heat ring on those right to the end. And yeah, I've got one too. No, that's just a Wagner. I do have a couple of Wagner Nationals. And the prices on those have kind of picked up a bit too. The price has always been kind of all over on them. Some people think it's really cool that it's, it has the Wagner in the center and National. They think it's really something special. They're not really all that rare. They're not really all that common, but they're not really any hugely more rare than most things. But they're really interesting pans. Kind of neat having the dual mark things like that. John Briggs has an extensive book on cast iron bunt pans. Really interesting. I'd have to check that out. I don't have any cast iron bunt pans. They always end up going for more than I care to spend on them at any time. Coolest find last month was a Marietta, PA, B and Company 7-inch skillet, lightest skillet that size I ever had. A lot of those really were light, and there's more than one manufacturer that's marked Marietta, PA. Some are just Marietta, PA. There's B and Company, one or two other ones. It's hard to say if they were all the same company going through different ownership, or if it was two or three separate companies, or exactly what they were. But yeah, the Marietta skillets are pretty much all real nice light ones. I don't think Nordic Ware made a cast iron bunt pan. Uh, I think they did. I mean, they did make some cast iron stuff. Yeah, I mean, 99% of the Nordic Ware you find is going to be cast aluminum, but they did do some cast iron, and I want to say they did make some cast iron bunt pans, but don't quote me on that. But I'm pretty sure they did. I'm going to check my soup here quick. But I do know for sure that Nordic Ware did indeed make some cast iron at any rate. Oh yeah, that's bubbling along good. I'll give her a taste quick. See how my broth is doing. Yeah, those dehydrated mushrooms really give it a lot more flavor than even good fresh ones do. And browning the beef good really makes a big difference too. When you brown the meat, it really cooks it up. Do I often cook lentils? That's one thing I've never made is lentils. I've been meaning to get around to it, but for some reason I've never actually made lentils. I made peas, split peas, yellow peas, green peas, all of that. But somehow I've always managed to miss out on lentils. Got 2 Wagner bunt pans, make 2 cakes. Got a little hiccup going. Make 2 cakes at once, put together, and have a big donut. That's cool. And yeah, the Wagner bunt pans go for a small fortune. Yeah, technically they're tube cake pans or fluted cake pans because bunt is a brand name owned by Nordic Ware. It's like Kleenex and Band-Aids, even though everybody uses it as the generic term for that kind of pan. If it's not Nordic Ware, it's not a real bunt pan. Lentils only take about 20 minutes to cook. I got to try them someday. I mean, like I said, I've always wanted to try them, but I just never got around to it. You could use the word bunt because you don't give a rat's ass who owns it. Yeah, it's like I said, it's the generic term for that. It's like Kleenex or Band-Aids. And but officially, it's not a bunt pan unless it's an actual bunt pan. Where's the kitty at? She's next to the stove. Right at the beginning of the show, I pointed her out laying next to it. Honey's a little salty tonight. Well, honey badgers are like that. But yeah, it's coming along really good. Once I put the veggies in there, a little bit more salt, a little bit more pepper, but it's coming along pretty good. And like I say, barley's a lot like potatoes. You can it's a little more forgiving on salt than some things. They'll soak up quite a bit of salt without getting too salty. When you first started baking, you swore it was a butt pan. Well, if you started making those, I bet you could sell those too. And I'd be willing to bet if you looked, you could probably find one. Honey wants Cynthia to show up at his live for a skillet giveaway. You love seeing people getting into cast iron and saving the old family pans. Hate it when they throw out the scrap. Yeah, I mean, it's a shame when they just get tossed in the garbage or, thrown in the back of a car you're hauling to the junkyard, something like that. If they at least have the decency to donate them to Goodwill or, sell them at some consignment shop so the rest of us have a chance to get them before they get destroyed. But yeah, it's nice to see, there's very little cast iron that's really too far gone to do at least something useful with it. I mean, there's a few things, some of the old enameled stuff where the enamel is going bad. It's okay for hanging on the wall, but you can't really use it because it's flaking enamel off and you don't need, tiny bits of glass in your food because that's basically what enamel is. But other than that, I saw Orphaned Irons videos, bought a stack of black locks just to make spatulas. Yeah, I've seen some of his videos. A lot of the ones he cuts up for spatulas would have been a real simple welding job. It's just a crack on the sidewall. Those are pretty easy to fix. There's a few that you probably couldn't really do a whole lot with for welding. But yeah, they, he cuts up a lot of them that don't really need to be cut up. And I've seen a couple of them. It makes no sense why he cut it like that. And he could have actually got a lot nicer tool out of it, cutting it a bit differently. Your scrap metal sells auto parts but won't sell the cast iron. A lot of scrap yards nowadays they won't sell anything back once they buy it. Once they buy it for scrap, they have to ship it on to their onto their buyer. But you used to be able to go scrap yards, junk yards, if you needed some angle iron or I-beams or steel like that, they just sell you, chunks of junk I-beams, but most of them won't do that anymore. I don't know if it's a liability thing or what exactly. There are still a few, auto salvage yards where you can buy used parts, but most of the, scrap yards where they just crush the cars and take in industrial scrap, things like that, they just don't, they won't sell back things anymore for some reason, or, appliance parts, things like that. If you need a door for a stove, you just can't do it. I mean, hell, when I was a kid, there was a big industrial salvage yard. My dad took me to looking for steel for a project. And it was just a blast as a kid because there's all this, odds and gears and junk and great big ball bearings and all kinds of things laying around, big windrows of iron and junk. And it was just fascinating as hell. But you just can't do it anymore. California, you have pick and pull where you rummage through the rusting car parts. Yeah, like I say, there's still a lot of auto salvage yards around. Not nearly as many as there used to be because environmental regulations. You have to be careful about leaking antifreeze, oil, gas in the tanks, things like that. And liability. I mean, you still see videos of some idiot out in the junkyard has a car propped up, hanging midair, sitting on 3 5-gallon buckets and a cinder block, and he's crawling around underneath there, jerking and yanking and pulling on something. And even if you sign a waiver, you're still going to end up with a hell of a liability problem because people are just that damn stupid. wanted to get a stainless steel tub for your tank. That was a big no-no too. Yeah, like I said, they won't sell things back, and you probably shouldn't use stainless steel for electrolysis. When I made stainless electrodes for my tank, it ended up making hexavalent chrome. So yeah, I'm not sure why. So it's probably best just to avoid it as a general thing. But if you needed a stainless, tub for something else, like a wash sink or something like that, yeah, they just won't sell it back. Seems like every decent town within 200 miles of Abilene has a car salvage yard you can go in and pick. Yeah, like I said, they're still out there. But, I mean, it used to be you could find one every, 10, 15 miles. You'd find a junkyard. But, like I say, a lot of them have closed up because of environmental and liability and all that. That and cheap imported parts. I mean, you can buy a brand new part from China for $25, or you can get $20 for a used one at a junkyard. A lot of people just go down to the part shop and get the new one. Or if an iron charges a lot for the spatulas. The cash for clunkers ruined America. Yeah, a lot of perfectly viable cars ended up getting wiped out in that one. Need a dash bezel for your car, not one in Virginia or North Carolina. And it's always been kind of a problem with a lot of junkyards. They would crush anything more than 10 or 15 years old. So if you had a 18-year-old car, a lot of times you're pretty well screwed because it already crushed them all 5 years ago. Yeah, the wind's starting to pick up a bit outside. It's supposed to be snow and rain and wind, near blizzard conditions at times. I don't know if it's going to be all that bad. We're kind of on the south edge. We're only supposed to get maybe an inch or two, maybe 3, which means we can get anywhere from an inch to a foot usually. But most of it's supposed to pass to the north of us, the really heavy snow. But it's going to be windy, and then it's going to turn cold for the next week, so the snow will stick around for a while anyway. Might be there all winter, might turn 70 in the middle of December. It's kind of hard to tell anymore. Only had a few Wapak, 4, 7, 14, 8, and 9 Indian head. They're nice skillets. Yeah, Wapak they're pretty interesting. I got a couple. I think I gave away my tapered logo one. There's a block logo, the tapered logo, the letters kind of taper down towards the K on the end. The Z logo, where they got the little zigzag under the name, and then of course the Indian heads. Best anybody can guess, the block logo are usually the oldest ones. The other ones is kind of up in the air when exactly they were made. Where they overlapped, where they stopped one and started the next one. And a lot of the block logo ones are really pretty crude. It looks like they just took a chisel and punched in the letters with straight lines with the chisel on a lot of them. Because a lot of the old block logo ones, they used other skillets, already finished skillets. That's why you see so many that have eerie ghost marks on them. Some of them, I haven't seen one where you can actually read a Wagner ghost mark on it, but I have one, and I've seen others like it. It's where the Wagner logo would be, and it's the same kind of layout and all of that. So, and it looks like a Wagner. But yeah, Wapak's a pretty interesting company. There's tons of variations, a lot of different handles. all the excuse me, all the different logos. I have some of them where on the underside of the handle there's a raised letter. Not all the Wapaks have those, and they're pretty. Like I said, they're pretty interesting. Just trying to put together a good representative set of Wapak would take some doing. Be kind of a fun challenge to find it at a decent price at any rate. Rain, fog, and 40 in the middle of the state. Yeah, it's been 40-ish, the last few days, and it was foggy last night and this morning. But yeah, it's been raining, light rain all day, and it's probably going to turn over to snow here before too much longer. The number 7 Wapak and number 8 Onetta are the same size. Yeah, I've got a number 8 Onetta, and it's definitely a good bit smaller than what a number 8 is typically. Anyhow, I'm going to dig up a little sample of the soup there so you can see what's going on with that after simmering for about an hour. Like I said, it's got to simmer for a good 2 to 3 hours. Grab a bowl here. Stir it up. Get some barley on there, just so I don't grip every place. And let me there we go. You see the barley's already starting to fluff up a bit. And on the back side there, you can see the mushrooms. Give her a little taste. Yeah, it's really good. But it's going to take another good hour and a half for that barley to really cook through. But once you find the right spot on the stove, it'll definitely sit there and simmer nice. I got to throw a little more wood in there pretty soon too, making you cold barefoot and shorts. Yeah, it's plenty warm, right here by the stove. But yeah, that definitely looks delicious. I mean, if you want to, that's all the farther you really got to take it. I mean, you don't have to put anything else in there other than the beef, mushrooms, and barley. Like I said, I'm going to throw some frozen peas and carrots in there in a little bit. Well, not a little bit. Once I get down to the last half hour, 45 minutes or so, because really all I got to do with those is thaw them out and heat them through. And if you put them in too soon, you'll end up cooking your vegetables to mush, and you don't want to do that. But you can throw in celery, peas, carrots, potatoes if you want. Like I said, I usually skip the potatoes because the barley is plenty starchy on its own. You can when you brown the beef, you can brown up some onions if you want to. A lot of people like that. A lot of people don't with barley soup, but some onions and garlic, whatever you want to do with it. It's real simple, and it's really a great soup. Do it on your stovetop. You just put it on low, let it simmer for most of the day. You can do it in a crock pot, brown up your meat, throw everything in the crock pot, set it, forget it, and just let it go. Let it go all afternoon, and you got soup for supper. So definitely was something you want to give a try, making some of that. Let's see here. Thanks for the watch parts. I got those there's an antique mall near me. They had a big box, had some clock making parts that I wanted, clock making tools that I wanted. It had a bunch of real small tap and die sets. And that's what I was after. And the watch parts were just kind of mixed in with everything else. So I mean, the whole box I got for like $20, and there's which is worth a good bit less than all the stuff I needed out of it. And yeah, the watch parts are all just kind of incidental. But yeah, that little can full of hands, I thought that was cool. Those are some really nice hands. So hopefully you'll be able to use those. The trivet I had with the part on the side was for hanging on the sides of the stove to put your lid on. It could be, I'm trying to remember who told me, it could also be the top for a pot-bellied stove, where they have the dome on top of the round like a parlor stove or a pot-bellied stove. It's definitely a stove part at any rate. But anyhow, we're just about done here for the night. Most of the hands are for pocket watches. Yeah, I figured that, but there's some really ornate ones in there and some, plainer ones. Like I said, they're not really wristwatch hands. I think there are a couple that might be, but most of them are for a bigger pocket watch. Anyhow, yeah, I think we'll wrap her up here. I'll tend my fire and watch my soup. Like I said, I would have done this last week, but I had to work last Tuesday, and I'm off tonight, so I'll have time to finish it out. It's also in the Red Book in the Martin section. I'll have to take a look and see if that's in there. But yeah, it's like I said, you can tell it's definitely a wood stove part, and make a handy little trivet, I think, even if I don't have it exactly for its original intended use. You found a Wagner bunt pan for $30. Well, you lucked out. I mean, usually 130 is closer to what you pay for them. Anyway, yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I got to work Thanksgiving, but I got a turkey breast I'm going to take in with me and make on my rotisserie and have Thanksgiving supper there at work. And everything should be happy. And I'll see you guys next Tuesday. We'll come up with something different to do then. Hopefully it'll be fun, and hopefully you enjoyed the show. Give some beef barley soup a try. It's pretty easy to make, and it turns out fantastic, especially if you got some dehydrated mushrooms to go with it. Really flavors it up nice. Anyhow, like I said, I'll see you guys next week. Hope you enjoyed the show, and bye for now.